Hello there, welcome to Freight Perspectives podcast. We are here again to explore the topics of the European road freight market. I'm your host, Lena von Fritschen, and with me again is Christian, our road freight expert. Today, we're examining a crucial topic that industry watchers are paying close attention to, the relationship between spot and contract pricing. Once more, we have some data insights to share with you. And before we dive in, I want to share a discount code with you for our podcast listeners specifically to our Transporian Summit, which will take place 24th, 25th of September this year. You can use the podcast 30 code. So that's a 30% discount. And you'll find the registration link on our website. So, Christian, we've been seeing some pretty eye-catching numbers, especially with relatively high spot prices like in France, as our recent research showed. And honestly, the European level graphics you've put together are showing some really intriguing trends. So for starters, could you walk us through how these figures are actually calculated and what's the fundamental difference between spot and contract in the context of the European level? I think that's crucial for our listeners to understand.
Yes. So, first of all, our analysis compares spot price levels against contracted price levels. And it covers more than 100 country and region combinations in Europe. So it's a wide basket at the end, which is behind. And a positive value indicates spot prices exceed contracted prices. And to make it comparable, we apply a normalization to ensure apple-to-apple comparison, and we exclude outliers. So at the end, if the prices are up, as you can see here in the purple figures, this indicates that spot prices are above contracted prices. And this represents the average across all markets. So there are still some combinations behind with spot prices below contracted price levels. Nevertheless, if we take the more than 100 combinations, then the majority of markets now have spot prices above contracted prices.
Okay, so building on that, what are the primary drivers behind this current development we're observing in this chart you're just showing? So is this a widespread phenomenon across Europe, or are certain countries or specific lanes, or maybe perhaps particular industry sectors more impacted than others?
Well, the predominant factor behind that spot price increases or the elevated levels of spot prices is the capacity situation currently. We see almost record high contracted load rejections, especially in Western Europe. And this is indicating a capacity squeeze here in some countries, like France with high extremes, but also Germany, Spain, Italy, the UK all show across the board now high contracted load rejections, which indicates at the end that the capacity is tight. And this forces then shipments on the spot market and creating thereby a self-reinforcing cycle. As spot prices rise, shippers are trying to increasingly assign as many shipments as possible to the contracted market at lower prices. And then again, they got rejected and end up on the spot market. So that is the self-reinforcing cycle I see currently in the market.
Okay, so let's talk about this self-reinforcing cycle a little bit. So where you said shippers are under pressure, shift to the spot market, which in turn drives prices higher. So it sounds a bit like a capacity paradox in a way. Could you unpack this a bit? How exactly do shipper cost pressures and carrier distress feed into and accelerate this cycle? Is it critical dynamic for everyone in the market to understand?
Yes, the self-reinforcing cycle is the heart of the capacity paradox. And this paradox describes a market situation where sufficient physical truck capacity exists, but it's not available for contracted freight at the places needed. And this is creating an artificial scarcity that drives up costs and destabilizes supply chains. And we have 5 core components to it, and that's a squeeze on the carrier side because they face margin crisis. They have high operating costs based on fuel increases, based on driver wage increases, and they also have unprofitable rates locked into their long-term contracts with the shippers. And the response to such a financial distress on the carrier side is to reduce their active fleet or to exit some markets or some areas entirely. And this is leading then to a further tightening of the overall transportation supply in the market. And if the contract market fails, then carriers begin to reject then also unprofitable loads, which they have been invited for tendering, etc. And this is causing a reduction on the service levels. And then we are back again at the shipper side. The shippers, they do try as many shipments as possible on the contracted market with the more with the lower rates at the end, and waiting to get their shipments shipped on the contracted market. If that is not possible, then they move again to the spot market. This drives the prices further because they are really high. Then, as an urgency, then the prices are usually higher, and this at the end is reinforcing the the whole cycle, because then we have shippers on a distress as well, as they have high costs. We have carriers with a high cost. So in essence, at the end, the capacity paradox is a behavioral phenomenon where rational and individual decision by both shippers seeking for low costs and carriers seeking for profit and survival combine to create a dysfunctional high-cost market for everyone. And this is some sort of a unique situation, at least I saw in the market for years.
Yeah, so reinforcing cycle indeed. So now looking ahead, and one of our forecasts, or your forecast particular for the French market, is anticipating these elevated spot prices potentially staying around 8 to 10% higher than last year's 2024 figures through the summer. So what's your general expectation for the broader European land freight market during the upcoming summer break? Are we seeing similar trends, or are we there regional variations we should be aware of? What's your take on the upcoming months?
Yes, so we expect elevated spot prices. I mean, as we have seen in that analysis we prepared, they are really high and they will remain above the contracted price levels on an average. Of course, as mentioned, markets behave differently. There will be some with spot prices below contracted prices. Nevertheless, the overall sentiment will be elevated spot prices, and also in comparison to past year. The last 2 weeks had shown signs of a structural shift compared to last year's situation. And this is indicating that the market could move even further away from last year's level. So maybe we are at the beginning of such a structural shift to the market that we will then see a new contracted market and spot market sentiment compared to the last 1.5 and 2 years. So this is now an interesting summer, so to say. Let's see what we will see in September again, when businesses reopen after the summer break, and if the demand will still high then in that time.
Yeah. So that goes hand in hand with my next question. So you've mentioned also in some articles that, the current situation as a systemic vulnerability in European freight. Could you elaborate on what exactly you mean here for the key players, especially so the shippers, the carriers, of course, and the freight forwarders? So what are practical implications for each of them?
Yes. So I would see it more from a general perspective that the transport and logistics industry has seen no normal years in the last or in the past 5 years. The market has cycled rapidly from shock to boom to crisis and to recession. And this constant change has left no time for businesses to rebalance or allow adjusted strategies and business models to settle. So instead, we have external factors dominating, forcing all players to make continuous adjustments. And this persistent uncertainty has created the market extremes we currently experience. And we are not through it yet. So we still have trade barriers, we have tariff threats, and of course, we have the ongoing market transformation towards renewable energy. And this is continuing to impact the industry. So unfortunately, there won't be, calmer years ahead of us. We will have the market with high volatility based on many external factors.
Yeah, so a lot of forces impacting the market. Okay, so to wrap things up, the current market sentiment is clearly urgent, as you said, all participants to really double down on resilience, also critically to leverage data beyond the, let's say, insights we get from market intelligence platforms like ours, for example. What are the most crucial internal data points that procurement teams should be analyzing? What should they be looking at to build their own robust predictive capabilities and enable them to react more swiftly on these market shifts?
Yeah, I think the mentioned rejections and also rejections on the transports they try to assign, and also the response times to spot requests or the number of requests at the end on the spot market are valuable indicators. But they are primarily reflecting an individual company situation than a broader market. So I see it as all the time as a relationship between a company's experience and the overall market conditions. So that can vary significantly, and based on the assignment strategies of the individual company, contract requirements they may introduce with the last tender, and other factors. So what a company experiences is not necessarily reflecting the market sentiment at all. So I still encourage people to also check for market and not just rely on the own data, but starting with the own data and having transparency and visibility there is key.
Great. Thank you, Christian. That was really insightful as always. So if you want to read more, then visit us on our Freight Perspectives Substack. So we are heading to a summer break during August, and we really hope to see some of you at the September Transporion Summit in Amsterdam. Talk to you soon.